Okay, and that's on. All right, so we've begun the recording session of WCC training for volunteer groups. We've done our welcome, so we're gonna move on from here. So the other thing I want to point out is that any documents that I refer to today are ones that you have, and if you don't have them, you're going to get them. So those documents are the list of those from my perspective, and ones that I've seen that you have access to are a list of community support services. You have an emergency relief calendar, and that contains information on where clients can access financial, material aid and also food, and a list of low cost or free mental health services, and certainly a position description and friendly connections guidelines. So when I refer to documents in this training, I'm only referring to documents that are WCC based. So finally, a bit of an introduction. I want to thank Michelle for inviting me to run the training today, and for all that you've done to get it happening and organised. I know you're incredibly busy, you're all working really hard at the moment. So I just think that training like this is so great for people. So thanks, Michelle. And certainly thank you to WCC for often inviting me to different things, both training and support for staff. So my connection to WCC is almost coming up to 2 years now. So I deliver some training. I mostly those support staff. So I come in as an EAP provider. So what that means is I'm a counsellor. When people are struggling with stuff, they can access me privately, and I step in and support them. Sometimes I do a little bit of supervision, and anything else that WCC thinks that I might be able to assist with. So it's always great to be here and be a part of what you do. And certainly, the other thing I do is I teach. So I teach at Melbourne Poly, so I teach Cert 4 community service students and diploma community service students. And that's my phone. I didn't turn my phone off. I'm going to do that right now. You see, this is how it is in Zoom land. Things go wrong. There we go. Sorry about that, everybody. All right. Now, we haven't got enough time really to go through and introduce everybody, but I know that Michelle was on top of or thinking about or may have already done a sort of peer support group. So I'm going to leave that with Michelle and leave those connections with her. All right, let's get on to our first topic. So talking to somebody for the first time. Now, just actually to go back a step, these topics have come out of Michelle's discussions with volunteers and the things that they had raised and said would be useful. So that's where I've taken my lead from. I really just want to acknowledge the role that you're all undertaking at the moment. Reaching out and providing a connection to someone, particularly with what's going on at the moment, with the isolation and loneliness people can be experiencing. You're playing a really vital role. It can mean the difference between somebody having a good and bad day, basically. So I just want to acknowledge that. It's important as a volunteer when you're providing a service to clients that one of the first things we do, from the beginning is that we communicate openly and honestly, and you set clear boundaries, and certainly that's something we're going to talk about, and that you're prepared for the call. So being well prepared before you do something is really important. And again, I'll do some expanding as we move through. I really like this picture because it's like the complete opposite of all the technology we have at the moment. And who didn't love to play phones with a string and tin can? Yeah, a little bit of tongue in cheek. So the phrase begin in a way you wish to continue is one of my favourites because it for me, it talks about setting up things in a way that you actually can sustain. So, you know, I never want to start something that, I never want to sort of start up here if I can't continue that way. So it's a lovely phrase to keep in mind, not only for this, but for really anything you do. Can I start this job? Can I start this task? Can I start this conversation? And sustain that in the same way the whole way through. Ask yourself that at the beginning. All right, let's have a look at this list. So some of the do's and don'ts. So certainly introducing yourself clearly is important. Sort of, you think that goes without saying, but it really is important to be prepared for that at the beginning. You know, saying who you are, where you're from. I'm not sure of your client base. You know, people might have hearing difficulties. They might be older. Your first language might be different to theirs and theirs, you know, and vice versa. So that initial introduction and being really clear is really important. If they haven't already been explained the aim of the program, then you might be sort of stepping into that role. So you being really clear of what the aim of the program is important. So understanding your own documentation, understanding the actual aim of the program is really important from the beginning. So letting the person know what you can and cannot do. Now that can feel a little bit sort of sharp or a bit too sort of harsh maybe, but what I mean by that is when you are explaining the aim of the program, you're essentially doing that. You're essentially saying what you can do within there and what you can't do within there. And again, we're going to expand on that a little bit more as we go through. So being an active listener, another one of my favourite phrases. It's certainly, you know, listening is one thing, but being an active listener is really what we're wanting you to do, because when we're actively listening, what we're actually doing is understanding and hearing what's important to the person rather than what we think might be important to us. So sometimes when we listen, we've got a whole lot of stuff going on in our own minds. You know, we're thinking about other things, or we might have gotten a bit stuck on a sentence they said, you know, 3 sentences ago, rather than actually just being where they are and hearing where they are in that moment. So practicing active listening, particularly I think when you're talking over the phone, is really important. You haven't got somebody in front of you, you can't see their facial expressions, you can't see their body language. So really tuning in and hearing what they're saying is important. So having a non-judgmental approach, certainly I know that that's, you know, one of the qualities that's being asked for if you're going to be in a role like this. It's one of the qualities that hopefully, well, and I know my experience at WCC is that everybody has this as one of their core qualities. So, but it's important to put there. So having some ideas for conversation before you call can just help you get off to an easy start. And again, we're going to talk about some of those topics. I've got a bit of a list and you'll have your own list as well. And reading the client's profile beforehand. So when we talk about preparation, one of the things you can do is read the client's profile beforehand, because you might get a little bit of a sense of who they are, what their interests are. You know, you get a sense of age. You get a little bit of a picture. But my I always say, don't get too stuck on that picture. You know, it's just a guide. It just gives you an idea of where you're headed, and then you're going to get to meet them and know them when you speak to them. So in terms of don'ts, so certainly don't provide personal details, including phone number, and again, that's in the information that you have. So don't advise people on areas that require specialist support. So the things that are really obvious are things like, certainly you're not providing medical advice, you're not providing mental health advice, or financial advice or legal advice. So you've got to stay away from all of those specialist areas, okay? So not bringing your own values and judgments into the conversation. So I always kind of have this image of myself going, okay, I'm just going to leave my own kind of values and judgments at the door when I meet somebody, or in this case, you know, if you're talking to somebody on the phone, just have a bit of an image of just popping them to the side, and move into that active listening mode, that non-judgmental mode, that I'm getting to know you mode, rather than this being about me and my own stuff. And I'm sure you're all totally all over that. So not making promises or statements that can't be followed up. So that really links to that idea of start in the way that you wish to continue, start in a way that is sustainable, okay? So we can easily fall into a sort of space of wanting to, I don't know, make people feel better, or, you know, say, oh, everything's going to be okay, or, you know, those big statements, but actually we don't know. You know, staying away from those big statements and promises, I think is just good practice. And certainly the last one is, don't feel like you have to handle a difficult situation alone. So seeking support, and I know that you've got access to support whenever you need it. So always remind yourself, if this feels tricky, doesn't feel right, I've got a question, always check in. Okay. So let's talk about boundaries next. I feel like we've had some unexpected lessons on boundaries recently, certainly physical boundaries. We've had big lessons on, we've had lines drawn, we've had X's marks the spot, and where to step and where to not step, and how far away to keep from each other. You know, and beyond that now we've got a sense of the border, our country's border, our state border, our suburban border, and for some people it's their home border, you know, thinking about people who are not even able to leave their apartments at the moment in those tower blocks. Certainly they're on my mind and I'm thinking about them. So they're very strong physical boundaries. But what are we talking about? What sort of boundaries are we talking about when we're talking about the work that we do here? And why are they important? And certainly, what do healthy boundaries look like? So let's have a look. So I've got a bit of a definition here. The reference is there if you want to go and have a look. It's a great site, actually, positivepsychology.com. There's some really great information. But this definition, I feel, suits what we're doing here. It's a definite place where your responsibility ends and another person's begins. It stops you from doing things for others that they should do for themselves, or in this case, a little addition there is, or with the assistance of an expert in the area they need. So the ultimate purpose of setting a healthy boundary is to protect you. It's to take good care of you. And a healthy boundaries is a crucial component of self-care. So when we talk about self-care later, keep this in mind, that that should be one of the things on your list of self-care, is keeping healthy boundaries. So having good boundaries has many advantages, including better mental health, better emotional health, and you're more likely not to experience burnout. So we know in community services, people who have good boundaries and a range of other qualities or a range of other practices, including good self-care, we know those with good boundaries are much less likely to experience burnout. And when we talk about burnout, we're talking about, being negatively impacted by the work that you do. So being clear about your boundaries also allows you to have a positive influence on someone and gives you more autonomy in the work you are undertaking. So what that means is that the clearer and surer you are in your role, and that boundary isn't blurry, you are more likely to come across as somebody who is trustworthy. You provide a sense of safety to somebody because you maintain that boundary. You contain yourself, you contain the work in a space that it remains predictable and consistent for somebody. So that in itself allows you to have a positive influence on somebody. And similarly, if you maintain that space, you can have more autonomy in the work that you're undertaking because you know what's within your work role. The more you know what's within your work role, the more you can just do lots of that, rather than, stepping over that boundary where it becomes a bit blurry. It becomes, we become less sure and a bit more shaky in the work that we're doing. So really knowing what your role is and sticking to that has lots of advantages. So I said there, it's a win for all involved. It's certainly a win for you in terms of staying well. It's certainly a win for the client because they get a consistent, clear service, and it's certainly a win for the organisation doing the good work that they want to be doing and need to be doing with people. So how do we do it? So how to set good boundaries? Let's have a look. So I've already mentioned this. So knowing your role and limits. So knowing your role and limits, obviously the first point of call is the information that you've got in the documentation. And then the second point of call might be that you continue to learn by checking in with the people who are providing support and supervision to you. So just as important as it is to know your own role, it's really important to know what sits in somebody else's role. So, referring to the documents, you'll see that you've got information on, for example, mental health services. So having a good sense of those, before you begin, having them beside you, you'll be able to see, actually, okay, this doesn't sit with me, but I've got a list of people here or a list of organisations here who I know I can refer somebody to. So being clear about your role from the beginning. So you can hear there's some repetition here, and that's because a lot of these things cross over. A lot of them have similarities, and it also tells you the importance of them. So being clear about your role from the beginning certainly sits here as well. Simply that clarity helps to maintain that boundary. The more you get to know it, the clearer you are, the more likely you are to maintain that boundary. So being open and honest with clients when something's not in your role is a really important skill to have, and really important to feel like you can do that. For some people, that can feel a bit tricky. When we're saying, really we're saying no to somebody, but really we're saying, actually, that's not in my role. I think framing something in the positive, so flipping that a little bit and saying, as an example, I want to make sure you get the best support for this situation. I don't have expertise in that, so how about I give you some ideas of where I can refer you to, or where you can call to get some support around that. Now, that may be within WCC, or it may be an external provider. And, in that, hopefully the capacity to steer that back then to a safe topic. Okay, so we've done that. Let's talk about one of the safe topics. You're certainly not going to say that, but you're going to talk about something that you've pre-prepared, or you've already gotten to know them, so you can go back to talking about the things that that they enjoy or they're interested in. So the next one, having referral information at your fingertips. So, that's just good preparedness. So having that information there all the time, you're not having to scramble around or, get something off the top of your head. And checking in regularly with the staff member supporting you. I always sort of say, when in doubt, you just check with somebody, and I'm sure that Michelle would be agreeing with that and supporting that as a strategy if you're ever feeling stuck or unsure. So there's just this reference here. So if you're interested in exploring more around setting healthy boundaries, because it is a pretty big topic, and it's not one that just sits here in this work role. It's one that I feel pretty passionate about in our lives. If we talk about boundaries with our kids, we talk about boundaries with our partners, our friendships, certainly in our workplace. It's a pretty important topic. So that reference there is a great one to go and explore. I'm just saying. Yeah, I can. I'll just put I'll see if I can, because again, I'm using a Mac and I don't know how to do it. Okay, so I'm not going to waste time by trying to work that out on the spot. I do apologise. I am a PC user, so I can't pick that up and pop it in. So Michelle, maybe what I can do is I'll send you the reference, and then you can email it to everybody, or you can look it up and try and pop it in now. All right, so let's move on. So I've just got the differences between a friendly caller and a mental health professional, and I'm sure you know these, but I thought it would be good for us just to have a bit of a look and give you a sense of what I feel like the differences are. So friendly caller is listening as a friend would, okay? It's a regular, everyday kind of conversation. So we're not getting into, the depths of what a mental health professional would get into. We're talking about everyday topics, everyday things. We're certainly not there to challenge the person. When I say challenge, I mean, in mental health exchanges, we are often in a position of challenging somebody's thought processes or their actions to try and help them move into a space where there's less distress, or there's some kind of movement for improvement in their lives. That's not what we're there for. Certainly, just by having conversation, by having connection, we hope and we believe there's improvement, but we're certainly not there to challenge them. So talking about light or safe topics, and again, we're going to look at safe topics. And, you know, clearly we're not trained as mental health professionals, so remembering that, that role sits with a trained professional is important. So the mental health professional is trained with formal qualifications. They certainly have experience in dealing with strong emotions or mental health presentations. They're able to assess or diagnose clients. And they have highly developed professional boundaries to ensure their own well-being. So that's really important. You know, that's a big part of their training and practice, and certainly why, you know, one of the topics here is talking about boundaries. It's important for everybody. Yeah. So I wonder, just looking at the time, we might keep moving, and so I was going to pause then for a second and see if anyone had any questions, but I think we'll keep moving given the time. So the next topic is safe topics, and I'm sure that you will have lots of ideas, but let's see. What we've got here. So having an idea of what safe topics you can talk about can make it much easier. So not only to begin a conversation, but you know, we were talking about before, possibly having to steer it into another direction if you need to. So going back to boundaries, making that connection there. So, you know, preparedness is important. So when you're getting to know someone for the first time, having a list can help you really get the conversation going. So if it's difficult at the beginning and you've got a bit of a list, if you are prepared, you can check in. You know, as an example, you might say, are you reading anything at the moment, or are you watching anything on television at the moment, or whatever it is that you can think of might get the conversation going. Music, food, you know, all of those things. But having that next to you, you know, I often, when I'm unsure about something for the first time, I actually I write notes to myself, you know, next to me. I sort of write little messages to myself. Deb, you could say this, or, you know, don't forget that, or if you get stuck, say this. So, you know, do whatever's going to work for you. And then once you've established the relationship, you will have gathered knowledge about them. You know, you will have picked up what's important to them. So remembering those topics and returning to them next time you speak, you'll be on your way then, you know. And if, you know, that topic runs out in the conversations to come, you can come back to your list and open up new topics that maybe that the client hadn't sort of raised or thought about before. And you never know, you might offer them something that they hadn't thought about doing, or, you know, thought to raise with you. So I've got a bit of a list here, and you know, I'm very aware it's not an exhaustive or an exhausted list. You can add your own. So I put there music, sport, movies and TV, celebrity gossip. I know nothing about celebrity gossip, but I thought that might be fun. You know, people often do arts and crafts or have hobbies, places you visited. I think that would be fun, given we can't go anywhere at the moment, remembering all our favourite holidays. Food, sharing recipes. I think food's a great connector. Books or reading in general. Good news stories, you know, bringing lots of positive stories, I think, into the space is a really good idea. And then I'm sure there's lots more that I haven't put there. And I'll leave that in your capable hands. All right, what are we going to test? So self-care is next. Yeah, also one of my favourite topics, not only important for us as individuals, particularly now It always is, but certainly in the work that you're doing, we need to be aware. So what are we talking about when we talk about self-care? So it means different things for different people. For some, that's getting time alone, and for others, that's spending time with family or friends, or going out and about and being in, you know, big groups of people. So for people who do feel like that normally, or that's where they get their joy from, being around a lot of people, you can imagine that's really difficult for people right now, being isolated, not being able to be in big groups. I know from my daughter, she's incredibly social, loves going out and about, so she's feeling it at the moment, me limiting where she can go. For some, it might be exercising or reading or cooking their favourite meal, or it could be meditating, praying, or spending time in nature and connecting with the environment. Different for different people. So when we talk about self-care, we're talking about ensuring you do the things that make you feel well and happy, and able to continue all the things that you do in your daily life without becoming depleted or run down. So, you know, there's an analogy, you know, where you're sort of I know the kids do it at school, they talk about filling up your bucket and how full is your bucket, you know, are you running low? That could be because you're not taking care of the things that you need to take care of for yourself to feel strong enough, well enough, able to do all the things that you need to do in your life. We have a lot of demands on us. We have family, we have friends, we have, you know, all sorts of things that we have to deal with within that. We have work. And when we've got this added pressure of what's going on around us, it's really, really important that we have an awareness, a conscious awareness of doing things that look after ourselves. Women in particular are a bit prone to putting themselves last. And, you know, I know that the majority of people who are in these roles tend to be women. So why is it so important? So it's important for everyone, although it's particularly important when we're supporting other people. So you can become depleted by supporting other people, whether that's, you know, doing even a couple of hours of work a week, or full-time supporting, or anything in between. When you are supporting other people, the likelihood of that depletion goes up. So I've already said this. So when we support other people, we can sometimes forget about ourselves. So we might also hear some stories or situations that are distressing. So we have to keep that in mind. You know, you could just hear one story that's particularly distressing, and that would be enough to make you not feel so good. Then it's really important that we return to our self-care strategies, and that we seek support. I'm going to talk a little bit more about that as we move through the next couple of slides. And we need to ensure that we maintain the things that make us feel good and feel supported. So like I said, I think that it's important to do that very consciously, you know, to actually say to myself, oh, this is the moment in the day, or this is the moment in the morning that I am doing this thing to actually care for myself, you know. So even if that's taking 15 minutes out to have a cup of tea or a cup of coffee, and having silence and having separate time, rather than sort of rushing to do that in the middle of doing something else, even that small thing, that consciousness and that attention can make a difference to your day and how you feel about moving through your day. So it's really important not only to know what makes you feel good, but you have to know signs when you're not doing okay. And lots of us don't do this so well. So I thought it was important to pop this in. Bear with me, I'm just finding some notes. Okay, so let's have a look at this list. So possible signs that you might not be doing okay. So you might be having poor sleep. So if you're generally a good sleeper, but you are not sleeping so well, I would stop and say, okay, what's going on here? Why am I not sleeping so well? Am I thinking about something? Am I anxious about something? Have I have left something undone? I'm unsure. Any of those things. So interrupted sleep is a sign. Change in eating habits. So if you are eating less or eating more or not eating well, and you would normally do those things well, can be another sign that you're not traveling so well, or that there's a shift of some sort. So relationships with family and friends feeling difficult. So if there is tension that isn't normally there, if you're a bit short, you're losing patience easily, I would be checking in with myself and saying, okay, what's that about? So if you can't stop thinking about clients, so if you are taking that, I know you're in your homes, if you are taking that home metaphorically and you are thinking about them and you can't stop, I would be absolutely reaching out for support and talking about that. So just not doing the things we usually like to do. So if you normally have a good activity base, if you go for a walk or if you have a particular hobby that you do and you're not doing that, you're withdrawing from that, I would be stopping and thinking, what's going on here? So certainly feeling low or not motivated is absolutely a sign. So, and not letting that go is important. Not letting that go on for long is important before you reach out for help. So withdrawing, so similar, if you normally kind of talking to people or connecting with people and you're withdrawing. And really, what I'm saying is anything that's not quite like you, it's important to recognize that. So, understanding what your baseline is, understanding, you at your baseline or your general best, and knowing the variations of that, those signs, is really important. So I think it's a great idea to make a list, really, of what you do to make yourself feel good. What are the things that you need to do to be your best self? And again, this is about having a real consciousness of how you look after yourself, and referring to that. Because when we're not feeling so good, we can actually, surprisingly, and I hear it so often, forget what actually makes us feel good. I hear often enough when I check in with people in my role as a counsellor. So, okay, what do you normally do? And people are stuck, and say, oh, do you normally, go through, oh, that's right, I forgot, yeah, I do, that does make me feel good, they're often very simple things, but when they go, they have an incredibly negative impact on us. I really like this list. It's not my list, I did not create it, but it's kind of fun and I like the pictures, and if you feel creative, then you could draw pictures as well. But I would really encourage people, if you haven't, if you're not already clear or you don't have that list, writing up a list, popping it up on your fridge, or anywhere that's, you know, in front of you. I think it's a really good thing to offer clients too. You know, that can be a conversation you have. Oh, what do you do to make yourself feel good? You know, and you can tell them what you did and how you did it. You know, you could almost do it in real time with each other. It would be a really lovely activity actually to do. I haven't got a cat, but I've got a rabbit, so I cuddle my rabbit. She's very sweet. Okay, so then I've got some frequently asked questions. So again, these came out of some of the exchanges that Michelle and I had. So I've got 3. So, and then we're going to get 2 questions, then it's over to you at the end. So we're nearly towards the end, and then you can feel free to ask questions. So the first one I put there is, how do I change or finish a conversation when I know it's beyond my role? And I get that this can feel a bit tricky for people, you know, practice makes perfect. But it's important to be clear and honest and feel good about that. So, for example, you could say, you know, I feel that's something you talk to a counsellor about, so frame it in the positive. I really want you to get the best support possible, and I'm not able to do that in my role. So being really clear and direct about that is important. And then being able to offer something to somebody in terms of a referral point or some information, then you feel like you've given them something, because I get that it can feel difficult. If you haven't got something for somebody, that can feel a bit uncomfortable. And then steering it back. You know, would you like to talk about that TV show you were telling me about last time? So, or whatever it is that you're talking about. So I'm not sure where people are at, and you'll all be at different sort of places and spaces in your practice, but you know, that's a nice baseline to think about. So certainly this one is important. What do I do if I think somebody's seriously medically unwell or at risk of harm? And it's in your guidelines. So I took this straight from your guidelines, and the extract is there. So certainly in a health-related emergency, you're going to call 000. And I think that statement, if it's possible before hanging up, I'll certainly inform the client that you're contacting the ambulance. You know, being transparent, being open and honest with clients is always the best policy. And then the other one there, if they're experiencing immediate danger, same thing, you're going to be calling 000. And if you can, if there's an opportunity there, contacting the police. And then, you know, the important thing after that is obviously for you to report that straight back through to whoever the supervising staff member is. So the last one there is, what do I do if I'm unsure or worried at any time? So always contact your supervising staff member. They're there to support and guide you. It's always okay to ask for help. Asking for support is great practice, and it contributes not only to your own self-care, but, you know, really importantly, it always will provide a better outcome for the client you're supporting, and that's, you know, that's our ultimate goal. Done. Question time. Gosh, that went fast. We've got 7 minutes for questions. All right, I'm going to All right. Has anyone got any questions? Michelle, if I've missed anything, you can, maybe you can be the voice of that question. Keep in mind, Michelle might have to answer the question, everybody.
There is a question I talked to a volunteer about last week, and it's around this particular client possibly being drug affected.
Sure.
So, yeah, because how do you tell if they are, and what's the response?
I don't know how you tell if somebody is drug affected or alcohol affected. I could make some assumptions, but I think the important thing there is that is actually very difficult to tell because they, okay, so if you were talking to them for the first time, I would certainly say that's near on impossible, because somebody might have speech difficulties. There might be something going on for them that makes them sound a particular way, or move through a conversation in a particular way that isn't related to drug or alcohol. So, but then if you're having ongoing conversations with somebody, then you get to know them more, and then you can hear the variations, can't you? Like, oh, they sound really different to how they sounded last time. So this time their speech is really, really clear, and I'm just saying this, they're not rambling, for example. Last time they were. So you might kind of go, oh, okay. And then next time you might hear that rambling and that slurred speech again. So you might start to develop a sense that maybe that's what's happening.
Yeah, and I thought it was because, they're just starting the relationship, they're just developing their trust. So it might be something in relation to feeling a bit anxious or at the beginning, maybe, but yeah, it is.
I think that's really important, Michelle, to understand that, it may be something else. And then I sort of think, well, if they are, and as long as the conversation is appropriate, then I guess as the volunteer, you'd have to make a decision about how you're feeling in it. Like, if you're still able to chat about, good things and somebody has a connection, then I'm not sure that being alcohol affected or drug affected is necessarily a not okay thing. I think it would become not okay if it was having a negative impact on the worker. And I think maybe that's probably something to take and nut out policy-wise, maybe have a chat to him more about that.
Okay, thank you. Is there any other questions that anyone has?
How about if the client keep asking about our phone number because they think we already a friend? So sometimes she said she wants to call me because I'm feeling lonely.
Yeah, that's a really great question. How have you handled it, Rima?
Huh?
How have you handled it to date?
Yeah, that's why I'm a bit confusing how. Because they think, we already close and talk, and sometimes, can I call you sometimes? So how we handle it to give.
I mean, when she asked that, what did you say to her?
We're not allowed.
Right.
Because it's like a rule.
Right.
From the community services. Yeah.
You know what?
So I'm sorry that we can.
That's the perfect answer. So I always encourage, again, that's why it's so important to understand what our role is. And if you have those guidelines and you have your position description, you always go back and refer back to the agency, refer back to WCC rules, because that takes the pressure off you. Because we don't want to feel the pressure. The organisation can feel the pressure. So I'm really sorry, Joe. I know that you would really like my phone number, but unfortunately, the guidelines and my position descriptions say that I'm unable to do that.
Okay, thank you.
And I can contact the client too, just to reiterate what you've already said, Rima.
Yeah?
Okay. Yes.
Yeah, if it becomes a problem, as in if somebody continues to ask it and it's becoming a barrier to having a good connection because that's all they're focused on, then absolutely, Michelle, reiterating that would be a great strategy. But I think that, if you are able to feel confident, at least, let's say it happened 3 times, I would give it 3 goes. If somebody asked 3 times and they asked a 4th time, I would be saying, you know what, I might just move that up to get some support. But otherwise, and it's important to say the same thing every time. Don't say a different thing. When people hear the same message in the same way, it's much more powerful and much more effective. So if you say the same thing, do you remember what I told you last time, Joe? The organisation's rules, that I can't give out my phone number, and that's it. And then you move on. Hey, let's talk about that.
I've just got another question from Ange. So she's wanting to know how to finish a conversation that is lengthy.
Okay, so do you have time frames on, do you have a set time? Like when you talk to somebody, Michelle, do you say volunteers should talk for half an hour or 20?
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
Not really, no. We don't have a set time. I mean, the first initial conversation, we suggest a short conversation.
Okay.
But there's no real rule around it.
Okay, so that can be tricky then, because if clients don't know what the parameter of a conversation is, and somebody is a long talker, let's call them a long talker rather than a short talker, that can be harder to wrap that up. So for people who, for people like that, if you give them an idea of how long you have, then you can refer back to that. So maybe a strategy for people in that situation, it might be better at the beginning to say, you know, I've got 15 minutes today, so you know, I have to finish at 2:15. But hey, what have you been up to? And then give a time warning towards the end. So, and again, that for some people that might feel a bit tricky, but actually, what it does is it supports the client to know exactly where they are. It's a good boundary. You know, time setting is good boundary setting. Now, if you hadn't had the opportunity to do that, so that's one tactic. If you're in the guts of it and you're there, I would, you do have to just be quite confident and say, you know, I really want to hear more about this, but right now I do have to go. Let's finish this conversation next time I speak to you. So just being really, really clear. So I know for some people that can feel a little bit uncomfortable, but the more you practice that, the easier it becomes. I really want to hear about this. I don't have the time right now. Let's continue it next time. Now, somebody might keep talking and then you'll just have to say, you know what, I have to go now. It's been great. I'm going now. And you're going to say goodbye.
Can I ask a question?
There's another question here. So from Nicole, what's a healthy frequency and length of conversation?
Oh, that's up to you, Michelle. I don't know. What maybe that's a guideline thing we need to update. I think that's kind of a, you know, how long is a piece of string, because it depends on the client. So I think that probably could get referred back to guidelines.
Okay. I mean, I would say 15 minutes, but yeah, it's depending on, I guess,
15 minutes.
the person.
Frequency, we're talking about like once a week or twice a week or once every 2 weeks. Is that what the frequency part of it?
Around once a week.
Okay, so you're saying around once a week and sort of a 15-minute chat. You're feeling like that sits well.
I'd say, yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. Does anyone else have any?
We've got time for one more question.
Yes.
Okay, so we've got one here. Fatima, what is the referral process for us? Like, how does the organisation decide a client needs this service with the volunteer?
So is that for you?
That's a good question. Yeah.
I can explain the question a bit if you need to hear about it. So let me know.
Yes. If you want to, yeah, if you'd like to ask it, that'd be good.
I'm just curious to know about, you know, how does the clients come in this service? So that will give me an idea about like how sort of a people I will be talking to. It's just because, people are so diverse, which is a good thing, but then we need to be prepared as well.
Yes.
So,
I think to make an assessment, it's best to, if you think you've identified someone as needing a service, let us know first, and then we can make the assessment. We can give the client a call. I think that's always a better idea. I think we've provided those lists of referral points in case it was something more urgent.
Okay.
But we're always the first point of call. So we can, I can call them, have a chat to them, and then refer them on to the right service.
Okay.
So,
Thanks.
just to add to that too, I think in terms of being prepared, and I hear what you're saying about diversity, and am I right in saying, Michelle, that you have a client profile before somebody gets a client profile before they call, so they have some information?
Yes, they have a small amount of information. Okay. Yeah, not extensive though. So
no, yeah.
But I guess it's been really great. It's really shown this service is essential because I've had people who are falling through the gaps, but when they're connected by phone to volunteers, the volunteer is able to develop that trust, and then that client can then, let them know about things going on for them, and then that volunteer can come back to us and say, hey, they need these things. And a great example is Alexia, who's here. She identified a number of needs with her client and let us know about that. So that's been really good. And now she's resolving some of those things that have come up. So yeah.
That's fabulous. So we need to wrap up, everyone. Thank you so much for taking the time. And yeah, thank you again, Michelle.
Oh, thanks, Deb. Yeah, it's been great. Will I stay on the call with volunteers? I know we've gone over time a little bit. Is that okay?
Do you want to do that? I can step out of here and you can just have the space, yeah, and then I'll come back, yeah, and close it down. So I can give you until like 11:30 if you want.
Okay, great.
Okay, I'll leave you all to it.
Thanks, Deborah. That was great. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Have people got time now to, was everyone's questions answered?
Yeah, Michelle, it's about the question that I said, if someone is not, they've got far too many things that they're talking about all over the place, how to get back on track is what I was going to ask. Yeah.
Yeah, that's a good question. So,
I mean, it's not just the one subject. It could be just, you're starting on one and, they're going into everything and everywhere. So you're not so sure, where the conversation is leading to. Difficulty understanding as well. This is what I was going to ask, but yeah, didn't get a chance.
Yeah, so containing the conversation. I think what Deb said about time at the beginning is a good one because,
okay.
And reminding them about the time.
Yeah.
And
you might not be able to get a word in.
Hey?
I think you might not be able to get a word in. Okay.
Can you just say, look, can I just interrupt for a second, or?
Yeah.
Can I say something about it?
Yeah, sure.
Yeah.
It is a wonderful question to start with, but it's a very, very big question as well. It is difficult to answer this kind of a question in this small space that we have at the moment, because there can be like hundreds of case scenarios to work through this particular one thing. So I think the best way to do it is to actually do it. And then when something comes up, we can take the supervision and then correct it meanwhile, and it will get better with the experience.
Yeah. Intervening, like, can I just stop you there and then just say what you'd like to say, or
Yeah.
trying to sort of, you just have to talk, even if they're talking, you just have to talk over the top of them. I know it might seem rude. It might seem rude to do that, but sometimes you just have to do it.
Okay.
What do people feel about having like this kind of support network, being able to ask questions and get those questions answered, not just by me, by, you know, everyone, like, you know, we've had input from other people. So
It's great.
Would a Facebook group be good, or do you like the Zoom meetings?
Facebook's good as well. It's more accessible. Like Zoom meeting is like you have to be there on a particular time, and if you're not, then, you know,
Yeah. So I might create like a Facebook group. Is everyone on Facebook?
No,
Yes.
I'm not.
I'm not.
Yeah,
But I can join. I'm sort of actually in the process of joining.
Excellent.
I'm one of those weird people. But I like Zoom. I'm fine with Zoom. But if everyone feels that Facebook is better, we can do it that way. I think it was very valuable this morning to listen to everything that Deb was saying. I feel that we can all learn something, and she said it out in a very specific, logical way, which was helpful. And I also I got some of my questions definitely I have answers to. So I enjoyed it. Thanks.
Great. Excellent. All right. Another option is WhatsApp. Is anyone on WhatsApp?
Yes, I am on WhatsApp.
I like WhatsApp.
I am on WhatsApp.
Yeah, WhatsApp is quite fast actually.
Yep. So maybe WhatsApp in preference to Facebook.
Yeah, I would prefer WhatsApp.
Yeah, because
also-
we are with people on handphone, so it's easier to check. Yeah.
I would prefer WhatsApp. Yeah, it's more simple.
Yes.
Right. Okay. And you don't have to sort of have any of your personal information out on the web like Facebook.
Oh, yeah.
Okay, good. And just to back that up, maybe a Zoom catch up every, say, 4 weeks.
Yeah, sounds good.
That sounds great. Yeah.
Okay, great. All right. Well, thanks for all being here. It's great to put a face to people I've been talking to on the phone.
Thanks, Michelle, for putting it together anyway. Yeah.
Yes, thanks.
Having this, organized here. Thank you.
All right. Well, thanks everyone. And I'll leave it here unless anyone else has got any other questions.
No, that's all good.
All good?
All good.
All good.
Excellent.
Okay, bye.
Remember to call me if you need anything.